This is literally how I always feel when people try to say, "Oh, money won't make you happy." Like, ma'am, I beg to differ. Being broke definitely won't make me happy. Like, when I get a little piece of extra change, put it in my little savings, my little investments, guess what? I'm happy. Every time that happens, that's a little added sprinkle of happiness and a little added pep in my step. Let's go ahead and watch that one more time for the Dusties in the back. And then let's dive right in, y'all.
I'm rich. Hey. I'm rich. Hey.
And it seemed mostly were there to protect. They were there to enforce norms within the group. They were also there as security from either other tribes or from animals or from elements to go out and do things. It seems like even the big game hunting that men went to go and do netted an energy loss. So the lack of likelihood of them bringing it down, the amount of times that someone got injured or killed, and the amount of energy that you got back if you did finally take down the woolly mammoth or whatever, was almost always a negative. However, it was great mate signaling. So it was fantastic as a peacock's tail that look at how competent I am, I've brought this down. But as women could have absolutely survived on berries and nuts and things they pulled out of the ground. So my question as he went through all of this was, well, okay, well, what is the role of men? If that's the case, if we didn't need them to go and hunt, and women, they do allo-parenting, you've got the grandmother hypothesis now for why menopause occurs. So it seems like women stick about and they do this sort of shared parenting thing. Unbelievably rare, even in other primates. Allo-parenting, very, very rare. Like the mother takes care of her child, not in humans. It's the mother and the grandmother and some of the aunties and sisters and maybe a friend. And it's this big, big group. Okay, so what's the use of men? I wonder whether we are seeing again in the same way that women or females having equal access to education unearthed some of the underlying disparities within the system. I'm wondering whether the same thing has occurred within the family, that with women no longer needing men around, that the surplusness of men within the family has now finally been revealed.
Hola, hola, mis amores, hi, my loves. How are you doing today? So I'm back with another video. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the males and all the whining that they've been doing. It's so crazy to me how they feel so comfortable with being so subpar. I can't even say mediocre. I can't even say average, because it's like, there's nothing wrong with being average, but these males are literally at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the barrel. And the only thing they've been resorting to, y'all, is insulting women, calling women names, like making excuses for them being failures. Y'all, it's wild. Like, I can't even believe how they're trying to like cope through it. I don't know what their future holds at this rate, because there's no improving going on. Like none. They're like incapable of evolving. So I don't really know what their future looks like, y'all. Like, I don't know what their future looks like. What do y'all think their future looks like? I don't even see that they could have one. I think only the ones that they quote unquote classify as alphas can survive this. There's no other, and I say quote unquote because I'm using their terminology, right? The ones that they quote unquote classify as alphas are really the only ones that can make it through this time period where women are taking over everything. The rest of them cannot survive. They will not survive this. Like, they're just like insulting women. That's not going to take you anywhere. You're just going to end up dying off, literally. So it's just crazy, y'all. So let's take a look and see what's going on here. Also, before I forget, because every video I always forget, don't forget to smash that like button for me. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button for me. And don't forget to hit the bell for notifications every time a new podcast comes out. So welcome to the podcast. If you're new on this channel, we talk about anything and everything women related on a regular basis. So if that's your vibe, go ahead and smash that like, subscribe, and the bell so that you get a notification every time a new podcast comes out. Also, our store recently opened up. It is IPGGlux.com. See it in the link below. If you want to check out some of the awesome merch that we have 4B, 4Bear merch, as well as health, self-care related merch, because that's so huge for women. It's something that we really believe in, especially as you're growing in your journey. If you are still on that journey, which everyone is always or should always be on that journey of continuous self-love, self-care is a big part of that. So the link is left in the description below. We're always adding new designs and products to the store, so definitely go ahead and subscribe. And when you subscribe, you also get notification every time we drop a new blog. We do weekly blogs on different topics, up-to-date topics, when it comes to the 4B movement, when it comes to 4B for Bear, any news related to women, we make a weekly blog on. So in order to receive those weekly blogs, they're so informative and awesome to have. Go ahead and subscribe on the IPGGlux.com website, and you'll get the weekly notifications for those as well. I think all you have to do is put in your email and that's it. All right, so let's get going. Let's see what we've got here, y'all.
What's happened to males in education then?
What's happened is that males have fallen rapidly behind females at every stage of the education system and in every advanced economy in the world. So if you just take all the OECD countries, which is a pretty good proxy for decently economically advanced, there are more young women with a college degree than young men. In both the UK and the US, it's 60-40 now on college campuses. And that's happened incredibly quickly. When I was born in 1969, it was college campuses were about 70% male, 30% female. By the time I went to college in the late 80s, it was about 50-50, and now it's flipped to 60-40.
I don't know. Could that perhaps be because males suck? What do you even say to that, y'all? Like, they had literally hundreds of years ahead of us. And we just now got our rights. Like, what year did we get our rights, y'all? To be able to go to school, y'all. We just got our rights just to be able to go to school. Let's look that up. Let me see what I can find, because this is crazy to be coming here. And by the way, y'all, this guy is like the biggest weirdo ever. Like, he goes around acting as if everyone needs to feel sorry for males and everyone needs to pay attention to males and everyone needs to defend males and everyone needs to cater to them because they're failures. It's super crazy. It's like, how can you defend a species that has had hundreds of years of violence on women to get ahead and still weren't able to do so? They're literally getting decimated they're getting decimated by women. I mean, like, left behind is an understatement. Left behind doesn't even do it justice, right? They're getting terminated by women in comparison. And now they're all like in flux, all freaking out. They don't know what they're going to do. Like, it's a personal problem. They're going to have to figure it out. Like, women can't fix their issues for them. I mean, we have enough issues of our own that we have to, pay attention to and fix for ourselves, right? Like oppression, pygmishas that are within our own gender group that we have to make sure that, as far as like how much damage that these knuckleheads are inflicting, like, we have enough problems on our end. We can't afford to even give any additional resources to the despicable male species that can't even keep up with something that they had hundreds of years to get ahead of, literally, while they suppressed and were violent towards women and oppressed women with violence and through the patriarchy, which, by the way, y'all, we're still under. So this guy trips me out because he's on so many interviews acting as if there's anything that can be done for the male species. There's literally nothing we can do for them, sir. There's literally nothing anyone can do for them. They did it to themselves, and now they're boo-hoo, what was me? What do you expect us to do about that? It's so crazy. So let's take a look here. Okay, let's take a look here. So y'all know Google is your friend. Or is it? But anyway, so it looks like, it's barely been 60 years, y'all, since we've been able to work legally. So this says the National Organization for Women, now formed in October 1966, lost no time in pressing the President Johnson to realize the promise of equal employment opportunity for women contained in Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So 1964, y'all, so it's barely been 60 years. And it's a struggle because it's like, in what world did doing something like this ever make any sense to these people? You know what I mean? Like, I guess in the world where they know that they're not worth anything. So in order to hide that to the best of their ability, they use violence towards women to do so, I guess in that world, right? So let's take a look here. That would have been 1964. So the act was 1960. 1964 is when we started doubling down on actually being able to use said right or said act to work, because they still weren't letting women work even after supposedly writing it into law, right? So that's about 60 years, y'all. That's all it took us. And it's not, we didn't even have the whole 60, because when you initially enact any law to try to amend any form of oppression, that takes years for it to even start, right? It's like the discrimination laws against Black people. And when they rewrote that, or whatever it is that they feel like they did, right? And I'm saying that because, yeah, they rewrote the laws, but why is racism still very, very much alive though? Why? But that's a topic for another video / podcast. But anyway, yeah, it takes years. Like even with the racism, they still had separation of toilets, for example. You know what I mean? Based off of skin color, which is something that you're born with. It's not even like we're talking about, like, trans women wanting and wishing they could be women, even though they're literally born as male. It's not even something imaginary like that. It's literally something very real. Like, you can see it. You're born as it. What are you supposed to do about it? You know what I mean? So if you don't like it, then why bring so many Black people here to work and build all your stuff? And now you're trying to take credit for everything that they built, but at the same time looking down on them for their skin color. The math ain't mathing. But anyway, it's about the same, right? So it's like about 60 years. That's it. The max is like about 60 years. And before that, they've had hundreds of years of violence and oppression against women to be far, far ahead of women. But yet, this is what we're hearing. We're hearing that they're so pathetic that in less than 60 years, women have decimated them. Decimated them. So now we start to see the reason why they kept us oppressed, and were violent towards us and continue to be violent towards us for this long. This is why. It's because they don't stand a chance. Trans women, that's why do you think they want to be women so bad? Because they know the truth of their own, of their original gender, the gender that they were born with. They know the truth. So it's just astonishing to me how now they are sitting here trying to cry foul play, or, I mean, I don't know what exactly they're trying to cry about. Y'all, this is like, I can't make this stuff up.
The UK and the US, it's 60-40 now on college campuses. And that's happened incredibly quickly. When I was born in 1969, it was about, college campuses were about 70% male, 30% female. By the time I went to college in the late 80s, it was about 50-50. And now it's flipped to 60-40, the other.
So 1969. So so we're talking about 45 to 50 years ago. So not even 60 years ago, y'all. And How pathetic can a gender be? Like, oh my God, I'm speechless. In less than 45 to 50 years, y'all, they are like, I mean, women have decimated them. Complete eradication.
Way. And so on pretty much every measure you can look at, girls are ahead of boys. And that's increasingly true even in subjects like math and science. So one of the ideas people have in their head is like, oh, we always knew girls were better at English and women better at English and those sorts of subjects. But aren't boys much better at math and science? But the answer is not really anymore. In most places now, the girls and women have caught up on in math and science as well, and in some cases overtaken, and still have this huge lead in literacy and English. And literacy and English turn out to be more important for what happens to you after that. So there's been this huge overtaking, which, by the way, no one predicted. It's really interesting. You go back and you read the stuff in the 70s when we were really pushing for gender equality in education to get more women into college and especially into more male-dominated subjects. And everybody was pushing towards parity. Nobody predicted that the lines would keep going. Nobody predicted.
Wah, wah, wah. Y'all, isn't that so funny to you? Sorry, I'm laughing because the internal joy I feel. I wish y'all could feel this level of joy that I'm feeling right now. So I am so happy I was born a woman because what? Of course you didn't predict it because you're dumb. You've always been dumb. Of course you didn't. I mean, this whole time using violence and force and oppression because you know you're not worth anything, but yet you're not psychologically tapped into yourself enough to be self-aware enough to realize, hey, the reason I'm using all of this is probably because I have no inner self-worth, no inner self-value. Wild.
Girls and women caught up with boys and men, that they would keep going and that we would now have a bigger gender gap in higher education than we did 50 years ago, just the other way around. So we've flipped the inequality now, and it's actually wider now than it was when I was born, almost. And certainly the US is wider, and I think in the UK it's getting close. So that's an extraordinary fact that no one predicted and can only be the result of structural factors. If it's happening everywhere and every level, it's not the kid, right? It's not Chris's problem in secondary school in a particular education system, or my son's problem in the US K-12. It's a structural problem with the education system that's just not male-friendly enough.
Structurally, what's changed then? Because
it's a structural problem. Is he high? That's the same structure that males were using before women came into the same structure that males were using. So you're trying to tell us that it's because you made it in a way to where it's advantageous to women. Are you high? We just got the rights 45 years ago to work. We just got the right to work 45 years ago. Actually, y'all, let's look up when we got the right to start going to school. Because for him to be sitting here trying to tell us that it's a structural problem, sir, that's the same structure that you've been using, even when women were not allowed to go to school, even when women were not allowed to get a higher education. So that structure hasn't changed. It's not like you changed that structure to better fit the way women would learn better. So what case are you? This is why males stay subpar. I'm telling you, this is why they stay pathetic. They will come up with any and every reason to stay pathetic instead of just evolving. Just evolve. Okay, y'all, so it just keeps getting worse and worse for the male species. So women, we actually weren't going to school and getting an education due to the violence of males until 1972. That's when the feminists, for the most part, most of the credit, if not all of it, goes to feminists, if anyone else, were able to liberate women and liberate us from the torture, confinement, and suffering that the males had subjected us to for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And that was in 1972. So we weren't able to start working until the 1960s, and even later were we able to freely get an education until 1972, y'all. So that is literally like about 45 to 47 years ago. So it hasn't even been 50 years. That's literally within my mom's lifetime. My mom, within her lifetime, and she's still pretty young, relatively speaking. So y'all, like, for these males to be being decimated the way that they are, and now they're crying foul play, is literally surreal to me. It makes them so unattractive. Like, how unattractive is that? Y'all. Ew. Okay, let's keep going.
Nobody predicted that the lines would keep going. Nobody predicted that once girls and women caught up with boys and men, that they would keep going, and that we would now have a bigger gender gap in higher education than we did 50 years ago, just the other way around. So we've flipped the inequality now, and it's actually wider now than it was when I was born, almost. And certainly the US is wider, and I think in the UK it's getting close. So that's an extraordinary fact that no one predicted, and can only be the result of structural factors. If it's happening everywhere and at every level, it's not the kid, right? It's not Chris's problem in secondary school in a particular education system, or my son's problem in the US K-12. It's a structural problem with the education system that's just not male friendly enough.
Structurally, what's changed then? Because just that more women are going to college and more women are performing better, that men should be doing worse.
No, and it's important to distinguish, of course, as you imply there, between relative and absolute, right? So if one group is doing better than another, then by definition, that the other group's doing relatively less well. It's like the gender pay gap, right? So the fact that women are earning a huge ton more than they were 50 years ago, but that doesn't mean they're caught up with men yet. So absolutely, wages have gone up. But in some cases, as the absolute educational performance of boys has flattened or has dropped. And so if you look at white working class boys in the UK, for example, or black boys in the US, actually in many areas, they're actually sliding backwards. But you're right.
Y'all, sliding backwards? They're sliding backwards? What did he just say? This is wild. I can't make this stuff up. They're sliding backwards. What? Y'all.
Kind of point to the distinction between relative and absolute. What I think has happened is that the education system is just structured in favor of women and girls because it rewards certain kinds of behaviors at critical ages, in particular, turning your homework in, being planful, being organized, being committed, sticking on the task, being future oriented.
Again, what is he smoking? It's not like they built the education system when women started going to get an education. This has always been the system. They didn't change it for us, y'all. So is he high? They will look for anything and everything to blame, they will do anything except for evolve. I have never seen a more, they're literally devolving, and they still can't get it together. They still can't say, okay, y'all, we're literally devolving. So the problem must be us and not any other external elements. The problem is us because we're devolving, and the women are terminating us. So what do we do about this? They can't do it. I don't even know why they exist at this point. They literally cannot do it. Everything that they have is through violence and oppression. That's it. It's wild. Now you're blaming the education system, the same system that's been the same, that you did not change for women. When women came in, we had to acclimate to whatever system was already there. Now, all of a sudden, it's the education system's fault, not the idiots that you keep grooming, but the system's fault itself, that women were able to come in and dominate regardless of the fact that you didn't change it for us. Isn't that insane? Crazy.
about the age of 60, which is when the gender gap in those skills is at its widest. And so what happens is that girls' brains just develop earlier than boys. It's just a biological fact. And in particular, in the prefrontal cortex, this bit of the brain that's the CEO of the brain, it is the bit that turns your homework in, that says it's the bit of your brain that stops you going to the party and makes you stay in studying chemistry, right? It's the bit of the brain that every parent waits to develop in their sons. Basically, parenting is like a 10-year process of being the substitute prefrontal cortex for your boy. Have you got kids? Have you got sons?
No, not yet.
All right, well, trust me, that's what it is. You're basically just going to be their prefrontal cortex until it's when is it coming? When is it coming? And the answer is much later than in girls. And so it's no surprise that girls are doing better. The surprise is that they weren't doing better before. Why weren't they doing better before? Because of sexism. The truth is that girls were always at a structural advantage in education, but we couldn't see it because it was never expressed in things like college going, exam taking, and so on, because they were preparing for a life of being a wife and mother. As soon as we took the break from women, the structural advantage that women had was exposed. So in a sense, by apparently leveling the playing field in education, what we revealed was that the women are much better players. And they are, as a result, largely, in my view, of development. It's also true that we don't have enough male teachers, that the pedagogy is not male-friendly, and so on too. There's a whole bunch of things going on. But taken as a whole, you look at the school system, it's impossible to come to any conclusion other than that this suits girls better than it does boys.
That's fascinating. The fact that this has always been lurking below the surface. This has always been the way that the population within schools has been performing. But because of lack of access, lack of encouragement, gendered discrimination that has restricted females from being able to reach their full potential in the education system, it's only when you've been able to open up those doors that the underlying disparity has been able to fully show itself. And I suppose that it's difficult because if that was the case previously, the assumption now is that the only reason there could be a disparity between boys and girls' performance is now due to some other type of restriction or sexism. It's by boys being told something, restricted in some way. So using the previous model of what was the solution to the problem for women and now mapping that onto the issue that men are facing, or boys. So it seems like it's more deep-rooted than that. This isn't the sort of thing that is occurring in the culture. This is something which is occurring in biology from a very early age.
Yeah, it's happening in the system itself. That's a great distinction. So I think that the main problem that women and girls faced before was they just had brakes on. They just had barriers. It was like, didn't go to come in. Like my dad went to college because, that was where he was going to hopefully earn more money and be able to raise a family. My mum was basically encouraged to leave high school at 17 and said, do you want to be a nurse? And the idea that she would have gone to college just didn't happen. And so you don't have to go, and it's so quick, this change that's taken place, but you're exactly right. And it's hard, I think, for people to get their head around that because it's happened so quickly that the idea that it's tough to get people to get their head around the idea that boys could be at structural disadvantage in the education system, which until incredibly recently seemed to be serving.
Sir, it's not tough to get people to wrap their heads around anything. The only people that are confused, looking stupid, are males, the male species. They're the only ones. The women are looking at them while they're looking at us and we looking at them like, what are you confused about? Like, what's so confusing to you? It's so strange. Like, why are you confused? I don't understand. Huh? It's so funny to me because I notice this all the time where males will try to say us, people. No, there's no us. There's no people. There's no we. You males, your male species, your species. Be specific. Don't categorize us and put women in the same category as you. The only types of women that would fit into your category are pygmishas. The rest of us don't even fit in there. So when you start the sentence out start the sentence out like that, you lost me because it's like, who? Because we're not confused. Women are not confused. We good. Are you good? Clearly not.
Boys and men much better than girls and women, like literally in the blink of an eye. And then there's a mistake that's made along exactly the lines that you've just identified, which is that some people say, there must be discrimination against boys in education. Then you get books like The War Against Boys, The War on Men, etc., which is that there is intentional discrimination against boys. And there's almost no evidence. No evidence of that. Like no one said to my boys when they're going through high school, don't you worry about college, just find yourself a nice wife and settle down. No one was saying that. They were saying, for God's sake, turn your homework in so that you stand a chance of going to college, you idiot. So it isn't discrimination, but it is instead the mixture of the difference between the chronological age and developmental age of the average boy and girl, especially in adolescence, has been revealed by women's movement. And also progressively teaching as a profession has become more and more female over time. And so we're fewer and fewer.
So I'll point this out. If it's a biological developmental issue where males are just, in simple terms, slower, literally intellectually slower than women, then does that not mean that by nature males are below women? Does that not mean that by nature, biologically, women that are born women and that are biologically women are above males? And I hate to say that, because if this were a matriarchy, y'all, because as women, most of us don't have this lust for power and control. That's primarily males. So even if we were higher on the hierarchy, because for whatever reason, that's our positioning within nature herself, we wouldn't go around being violent and harassing people. That's just not something that most of us are interested in doing. That's why a lot of times we're able to get most of the empathy, because first of all, it's most of the time women doing the empathy giving of empathy. Okay. And most of the time we're not walking around just terrorizing people and oppressing them with violence and who knows what else. You know what I mean? So it's this thing where, sure, women, we have our things that we have to work on, but it's nowhere even close to how despicable the male species is. Because if you're telling me what you're telling me is that biologically, which means by nature, by Mother Nature herself, women are above males. We develop more quickly. Males literally, they could be in their 40s and still not be anywhere close to where they need to be. But for women, we get there. I mean, you can see it's been less than 45 years and we've demolished the males entirely. Now women own most of the land in the US, y'all. We own most of the property. If we're looking at singles, we own most of the property. When we're talking about couples, women also own most of the property because males die sooner, leaving the property to the woman. So y'all, the way I see this is just nature correcting itself. Humans always try to run away from nature, and you cannot run. Well, actually, sorry, you can run, but you can't hide. That's more appropriate. So humans always try to hide from nature and try to gaslight nature, trying to do that which is not possible. You cannot gaslight nature. Okay. You can gaslight yourself with all this running that you're doing, but it's only a matter of time, because nature is nature. Biology is biology. You can wish you were something that you're not all day long, but all of your wishing means nothing when faced and confronted with nature and biology.
Male teachers in schools, and that does seem to affect male performance for reasons that are complex and so on too. And there's been a bit of a shift away from styles of learning that seem a bit more boy-friendly and male-friendly, like vocational education, for example, which does seem to suit, on average, overlapping distributions, seem to suit males more than females. And so there's been a series of trends in education that have, I think, exacerbated this underlying structural problem, which is a 16-year-old girl is older than a 16-year-old boy in terms of her developmental abilities.
Just how big is the... Did I hear you say that it was 2% of kindergarten teachers in America are male? Some insanely small proportion.
Yes, it's about 2%. Yeah, it's not going up either.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm glad about that. With the amount of males that essay children, I would not feel comfortable. I'm not even gonna lie. I would not feel comfortable having my children in no school with no males. And of course, males are uninterested in learning or evolving. So of course, they're not going for the teaching positions. It's women. Women are natural nurturers. And that's what teaching involves. That's one of the primary ingredients when it comes to teaching. Males don't have that. In what world? In what world? Right? They are now going around talking about, well, who's going to fight your wars? Well, guess what? They've started to recruit women for wars too, which makes you even more useless than you were before, because now women are going to go in there and dominate there too. So we have to, what excuse are they going to have for keeping women from being presidents when we out here fighting the wars that their gender started? And my hope is that once women start becoming presidents, then we won't even have to deal with these nonsensical wars, at least not at this pace. I don't even think we would have any wars, to be honest with you. I don't think we would have any wars. If anything, we would have like maybe intellectual battles, you know. We might have political battles primarily, maybe if we have disagreements on resources, but I don't see wars happening. And if they do, it would be way far less than what's happening now. Because we actually have a brain and we actually develop a lot quicker than you. Okay. Like you literally, males never catch up. They never catch up. That's one thing that they don't mention here, or they haven't mentioned yet, is that not only do we develop more quickly, males never catch up. They literally are unable to catch up, y'all. So the stupidity of trying to force women to go to war, you just lost everything. The only thing you could keep was the war part. And now you've lost that too. Y'all, I mean, it's just crazy to me. And not only that, you start the war. All throughout history, every single war has always started because of the male. From a male. A male has been the one to start every single war in history, y'all. Literally. But now you want women to fight the wars that you start?
Similar in the UK. These numbers actually do map pretty well across the US and UK. 1 in 10 elementary school teachers or primary school teachers male. And one of my sons actually works in early years education, so I get this a lot of this through him. He's one of the very few males, of course, working in that space. And so when you dig into numbers, it's about 2%, which is very low number. And to put it in perspective, as a share of the profession, there are twice as many, or even 3 times as many women flying US military planes as there are men teaching kindergarten and pre-K classes. So we have about 3 times as many, so 3 times, about 7% of US military pilots now are women. Now, I'm happy to have a conversation about
y'all hear that? 7% of women or military pilots are now women, y'all. So they're talking about all this war, not understanding and realizing, like, listen, we're dominating there too. We've already started taking that over too. They don't even understand that that's a problem for them. They don't even get it. When us women have to start dying in the front lines for the wars that you're causing, what do you think is going to happen? How are you going to keep us away from presidency? How are you going to keep us away from actually leading nations? You won't be able to justify it. We will just move you. We will force you out of the way. Literally. Literally. It's so insane, y'all.
Well, that's too low. What should that number be? And what's actually happening, of course, is that most of the air forces are doing this. They're redesigning the cockpits of planes so that they're not designed anymore around a presumed kind of male height, which also meant to be pilots do. But it also, most importantly, allow more. So they're actively recruiting. They're changing the design of fighter planes to get more women. Great. What's happening to get more men into early education? Answer: nothing. And so it isn't even seen as a problem to be addressed, let alone one that we're offering solutions for. And so it's one of the reasons I'm really emphasizing this point.
That boys or men have to be, before they have the same average level of impulse control as a 10 to 11-year-old girl, is age 24 to 25.
Yeah.
I know, like, it does dip. It does dip a little bit during puberty to give it its due.
As well. Yes, it does. Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, again, all the caveats about means and so on too. These are averages. But for sure, there's a huge difference in the development of impulse control. And that's really this concern about this prefrontal cortex. So the way that psychologists talk about impulse control, and the other side, it's in the same paper actually, so we linked to the paper. The other side of it is sensation seeking. So you've got impulse control and sensation seeking. And the way to think about that is, and this is how psychologists sometimes talk about it, it's like the gas or the accelerator and the brake, right? And during adolescence, you get...
I wonder why we have so many males that essay children, essay women, and even essay other males. It's almost like we're describing all of the violence and oppression that males have subjected women to for hundreds and hundreds of years. Wah, wah, wah.
A whole lot more accelerator and a bit not enough brake, and so that's when you do the crazy stuff. And then gradually the two start to balance out a bit more. But 2 things. One is the gap is much, much bigger, as that chart suggests. If you add sensation seeking to it too, there's just this huge gap for boys and for girls. So it's bigger in adolescence for both, much bigger for boys and girls. There's difference. Boys are just all go, very little break for a few years. Like, tell me something. Again, these falls into the category of, tell my mum something she didn't know, right? She didn't need to read the Journal of Adolescence, whatever it is. But also the impulse control development does come much later for boys, as that chart shows, on average. And that's the kind of skill that does allow you, as I said, to study chemistry rather than go out. It's the kind of thing that allows you to just, work on your GPA, etc., or your practice for your exams at 16, or so on. And so it's just that, those, they're sometimes called soft skills or non-cognitive skills or whatever you want to call them. That's where the gap is. It's really important. And some people misunderstand my argument here. In terms of smarts, there's not that much difference in development between boys and girls, but what really counts is actually, it is those skills. It is organization, impulse control, and so on too. And that paper that Catherine Page did with Elizabeth Schulman.
In order to be smart, you have to have those skills. So, those two work hand in hand together. If you don't have impulse control and you're not able to sit down and study, how are you going to be smart? So in terms of smarts, they stupid. They're dumb. They're behind. You know what I mean?
I think that on average, girls are more conscientious than boys. Females are more than men. Now, that is something that you can't, that isn't going to change no matter what you do with regards to the time that people begin school, any structural issues that you've got going on in there. That is a gendered skew, like men tend to be stronger than women. But what you can look at doing is, where are the areas where we can begin to close this gap? What are the sort of tools that we can use? So given the current nightmare of trying to improve males' successes in school whilst not rolling back the progress that we've made for girls, what's the solution?
Well, one headline solution is the headline of the Atlantic article you just referred to that Catherine Page responded to, is to start boys in school a year later than girls. So in the US, it's got referred to as redshirting, as a term borrowed from athletics, because of this developmental gap. Your age is a very crude proxy for development. And it turns out that it's the difference for boys and girls. And so my proposal is that whatever the school starting age is, that it should be staggered. And so the boys should be going in chronologically a year older than girls. And I think that will really start to pay dividends for the boys in adolescence, because they will have developed a bit more of prefrontal cortex, a bit more impulse control, a little bit time to mature a little bit more. And so actually will create more of a level playing field developmentally. And so that's one proposal. We've already touched on the need to get many more male teachers, especially in early years and English, and the need to do much more vocational training. But
do y'all think that would work? I don't think that would work. I think that would bite them so hard, because they keep trying to find external factors to blame for the males' complete and utter failures. I think that would bite them so freaking hard. These males would end up probably never even going, y'all. So you want to start them in school a year later? It's not enough that we live under a patriarchy and everything is already the easiest that it could be for males. Like, the cards are already stacked against women. So everything that's built here was built to make life easier for males from the get-go. That's not enough. Now you want to make them even more incompetent by having them start school later. Now, this is not something that really affects me or any women in general. I mean, we don't care. Whatever y'all feel like you have to do to catch up, then do it. But I think it's another one of the males' dumb ideas that is like, did anyone sit to think about the fact that developmentally males don't catch up? They usually don't catch up because it involves things like impulse control. It involves things like, experience and hard work and needing to literally survive because of all the oppression that's being put on you by your oppressors. Males don't have any of these attributes. They don't have any of these pushers, things that would push them to, further evolve, and they don't have it innately. So where are they going to go? These external things are not going to fix the issue, because if they wanted to, they would. If males wanted to, they would. They would try harder. They're not even trying. Literally, he just said that they're devolving. More and more of them are not even going to school anymore. So how are we not starting there? And the first thing we're starting with is, well, just don't even put them in school. Y'all, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. Maybe leave it in the comments below if this is a theory that you feel like might work. I am not sold on that theory. But then again, I'm a woman, doesn't affect me, don't really care all that much, right?
Bits of pedagogy, and I know that you've talked to people like, have you had Louise Perry on?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think this whole area of sex and the need for porn education in schools is actually one where I think I'd make quite a strong argument for separating the sexes when you're doing that bit of the curriculum. I think that's a bit of sex ed. I think porn ed is what we would call it. Is actually that's going to go much better if you're going to do that just with the boys, because the relationship of boys and men to pornography is very different to the relationship of women and girls. And that's a distribution, by the way, that doesn't overlap very much, right? So some of the distributions we're talking about, they're pretty like conscientiousness, you're right, but the distributions overlap quite a lot there, right? This one doesn't overlap very much. It's not that it doesn't overlap at all, but it's a very bimodal distribution when it comes to porn use. And sex generally is one of the areas where we see I talk a bit about this in the book, a big difference between men and women and boys and girls.
Automation, globalization has meant that the typical brawn-based economy that we used to have has now been replaced with a more brain-based economy. What's happened that's caused men to not adapt to this? I mean, women were not working at all. They were in the house, and then they just got dumped into the labor force, and they seemed to adapt. They weren't doing washing machines and cleaning up house tasks around the domestic area. What's caused men to not be quite so malleable, given that they were already in the workforce?
Well, I think there's a few things. One is that for a lot of the women, of course, a lot of it seemed like pretty much all upside in terms of like the economics of it. So for women, it was getting into the labor market and earning money for themselves. I think it was important even in my own life. My mum worked part-time, she was an industrial nurse and so on. But actually, even though she wasn't the main breadwinner, it was important to her to have some sort of, degree of economic independence. And then you just multiply that by a factor of 100 for the next generation, which is, no, you're going to be economically independent. And why shouldn't we have better wages? Why shouldn't we earn more? Why shouldn't we? Those are incentives that should apply to everybody. And it has been striking, just the movement of women into higher end male dominated occupations, so in the professions especially, much less so in lower end. So if you look at things like construction, for example, that remains very male dominated. There are not many women on construction sites, but there are a lot of women in law offices and hospitals and so on too. And so it's important because that tells you some of the incentives here are just about economic upward mobility for women, which is like, don't particularly want to be a labourer, but I'd very much like to be a lawyer because of just obviously the huge rewards you get from that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why would we want to be a laborer when we're smarter and we don't have to? I mean, literally, it comes down to the fact that we don't want to do it, so we don't, because we don't have to. We literally we're smart enough to where we have other options, to where we don't have to work these jobs that we might not want to work. But he still hasn't answered the question. The question is, hey, the males have been working this whole time. So how is it that they haven't been able to adapt, and women who haven't been working at all, they just kind of got dumped into it, were able to adapt, were able to find their way, were able to figure it out, and now we're dominating in most of these fields that are brain first. So he hasn't answered it. I'm still waiting for the response, because that was a really good question. That was a really good question. It's what we've been talking about, where, okay, they had like hundreds and hundreds of years of a head start. So how is it even possible that they're falling this far behind? It's wild. So let's see if he ever gets to answer this question.
But there has been this really interesting shift in women's identity and the way that women can take on a lot of these roles, and including like if you do become a firewoman or a construction, people are going to celebrate that. Very few people are going to think there's something wrong with you anymore if you become a women engineer or a woman in construction. Whereas for men, the identity cost. This is Rachel Cranton and George Akerlof had an article in the year 2000 called Identity Economics. And what it basically said was when people make apparently just an economic decision, they're also making an identity decision. What kind of person am I? What does this decision say about me? What does it signal about my identity? And up until this point, many of the areas of strong growth have remained very female in orientation, very, very gender segregated. And men have not yet, by and large, been able to adjust to a world in which you're going to have a better chance of making a good living as a nurse or some kind of living as a social care assistant than you are as, say, a factory worker or a labourer. And so that's one of the big parts of my argument is that they really need a kind of cultural transformation around a lot of those jobs so they do become more accessible to men and they don't seem as female, because the demasculinized.
I wonder who categorized the feminine label as being weak and not worth it. I wonder which gender categorized these types of roles that require empathy, that require care, that require brains as not good enough. I wonder who did that. Because it dang sure it wasn't the women that are currently working in those same exact roles. Dang sure it wasn't us. I wonder. Who could it have been? Whose fault is it? Wah, wah.
if I can put it that way, some of those other professions I just talked about didn't just happen by itself. It happened as a result of concerted, intentional policy effort, massive campaigning on the part of lots of well-funded organizations to really kind of batter the doors down on behalf of women. But there's no equivalent on the other side. We haven't really tried yet to help men make that transition, which means that for a lot of men, especially working class men, that's a pretty tough transition for a lot of them to make. They don't see them as male jobs. So you've got the male jobs disappearing, the female.
Wah, wah, wah. Jobs are jobs. They're not male or female. We just talked about how they're falling behind in education. All of these jobs that you're mentioning, you gotta be able to go to school. You have to be able to sit through class and turn in your homework assignment. And like nursing, for example, how are they going to do that if they can't if they can't even bring themselves to pay attention long enough to make it through school, y'all? So now he's blaming something else. Oh, it's the way that it's viewed. Well, sir, who created such a view? Who did that? Women? No, I don't think so. Not sitting right smack down in the middle of a patriarchy. We didn't. And it's not just the view. If anything, I don't even think the view has anything to do with it, because a lawyer could be a male. It could be a woman. I don't think it's the view. I don't think the view has anything to do with it, actually. Like, out of the whole 100%, the view of, is it a woman's job? Is it a male's job? That's like 2%. Like, that would change, like, that wouldn't change anything, because there's this fundamental issue where males are behind intellectually, just by nature herself. And the severe lack of impulse control. All of these higher level jobs require you to have something in your brain, right? For you to be able to use your brain, for you to be able to have impulse control. If you're going to be working in the health field with people with no impulse control, how's that going to work? Right? So that's why at the beginning of this video, I said, okay, most of these males are done for. From the words that they use, it's only the alphas that will survive this. There's no way. These males will not survive. The new times that we're in now, they're all going to die off, like literally. Only the alphas will survive, y'all. There's no way. It's too, they can't do it. There's no way.
Jobs rising and men stuck between the two. And the worst thing that can happen is the politicians to come along and promise that they can bring back those old male jobs, because a lot of men want to hear that. But that's an incredibly dangerous message, because we can't bring those male jobs back. And all you're doing is selling a dream, selling a nostalgic dream, rather than helping men adjust to the world as it is, rather than the world as it used to be. And I think a lot of men are just stuck in the vice between those two right now.
That's fascinating. The fact that politicians are running on a lob, basically. There's no way that this is going to happen. What are you going to do? You're going to roll back automation? Is everyone going to start paying more for their... No one's going to do that. You want cost of living to go up even more than it already is. And then on the flip side, I agree that, talking about getting more women and girls into STEM fields and getting them to do more of those sorts of subjects in school, in college, but there hasn't been the equivalent push for men to become carers or nurses or to work in HR or to work as teachers. And I imagine that if you were... This isn't just from a...
I wonder who subjugated women and made anything related to empathy negative and a bad thing. I wonder which gender did that. Wah, wah, wah. Losers.
We need to find a place for men in the workforce. This is how much better could the service be for the users of that service. If you are a guy...
Not really done very much to change these roles. And I'm glad you mentioned the point about users, because when I talk about this, the need to get into what I call HEAL professions, health education, acronym to match STEM, to mirror STEM. Right? You have to, in the US especially. And so we actually see fewer men in HEAL, declining numbers of men in psychology, social work, etc., tiny increases in nursing. And right now, only about 15% of care workers are male. I think this is the deepest problem of all, the biggest challenge, and it may run beneath some of the others or overlap or with some of the others too, which is the primary goal of the women's movement, second wave, I guess I'm not very good at my waves, but certainly the kind of Steinem wave was economic independence. Was post-war especially, was to say women needed to become economically independent, needed to break the chain of dependency that women had on men. That would make marriage a choice rather than economic necessity, and rebalance power relationships. And so it's all about material stuff. Obviously, since then, feminism has become much more cultural and ideological, but that has been secured to a very large extent in two ways. One, by massively increased employment and earnings for women, and two, by the expansion of the welfare state, especially to help mothers with children. So those two things have basically broken the chain of dependency that women used to have with men in the blink of an eye, almost in my lifetime. It's an incredibly short period of time. 10,000 years of some kind of patriarchy, 50 years to do a huge amount of demolition of that institution. Amazing. I mean, just extraordinary.
10,000 years of abuse and oppression against women. And now we see why they did it. Because, y'all, it hasn't even been 50 years and they're getting decimated in comparison to women. I mean, decimated. And we're not even doing anything to them. Literally. All we're doing is we're going to school, we're taking care of ourselves, we're looking for jobs that we can, make money off of and take care of ourselves. Like, we're not even doing anything to them specifically. So now we see why for 10,000 years, this despicable species insisted upon themselves in suppressing women through violence, not knowing that they are making and they have been making their own self-destruction. Because all of this oppression and violence, guess what that did? That made it to where now that we're free, women are free, it didn't take us very long. It's been less than 50 years. We've taken over most of everything. Because when you have to fight for every single thing, the mothers pass that down to their daughters, even genetically. If we look at genetics and how that works, you're always having to worry about your safety because the males are so violent. And guess what's going to improve? You want your self-awareness and your impulse control will definitely improve and go up. So y'all, wild.
Revolution that we've seen. So they were right. Feminists were right. They've been largely successful. The big question is, what does that mean for dad? If the previous role for dad was breadwinner, largely, he did other things as well, but it was kind of provider. And that was the relationship he had with the woman, and they had kids together. What if she's now a provider? Doesn't need him as a provider, but she's also still the main carer. The risk is that dads become redundant. They're just not needed anymore. And I think that's the world we're living in now, especially if they're unmarried.
They are not needed anymore, but they did it to themselves. Who created the patriarchy and said, well, I own everything because I'm the one that makes the money. And so I'm the one that should own and control everything. They didn't realize that by doing that, they made their whole entire worth. They reduced their entire worth to pennies on a dollar. So now that women don't need them for that anymore, and not only that, they revolved their entire worth around women. By doing that, that means the reason for your existence is women. Because now that women can we can take care of ourselves and we don't need you to do that anymore. Now what are you going to do? The irony, the times that we're living in, I'm just like, so thankful to Mother Nature and Goddess Lilith because for me being able to see it with my own eyes, y'all. So now what are you going to do? I don't know what they're going to do. Well, a lot of them are turning gay, you know what I mean? So that's an avenue. They could do that. And there's nothing wrong with, as long as you're open about it and honest about it. Don't try to involve women and harass women and lie to them. Go do what you want to do. You know?
Fathers, especially those who are out of work or who are struggling in the labour market, actually they basically get benched. Like, who needs them anymore? Because we're in this cultural lag moment now, whereas actually fathers matter hugely as fathers. But there's a real problem of fatherlessness in many parts of the Western world now, particularly in less affluent areas, working class. And I think it's because of this profound shock that has hollowed out the basis for the traditional family, which was economic dependency. And great, except now what? So I think I have a responsibility to deal with some of the consequences of even very positive social changes. And to be clear, I think we agree that the women's movement has been, by and large, an incredibly positive change, but it has had a bunch of side effects. And one of them has been to ask real questions about the role of fathers and the role of men. And unless we, re-pedestalize, to borrow some language from you, fatherhood as an institution in and of itself.
I don't know. Maybe they could actually learn how to be fathers, how to be actual fathers, Most of these males go around here impregnating every woman and anything and everything that can be impregnated. The children they don't take care of the children. The children turn out to be who knows what. And then these same males start screaming from the top of the hills, motherless behavior, motherless behavior. I wonder, maybe learn how to be decent human beings. Maybe start with that. But you'll never talk about that now, will you? It's always going to be some external reason why you are not a good person, why you weaponize incompetence, why you exhibit violence towards women, why you're rolling back women's rights, knowing good and well that it's not going to help you. The rights of women over their own bodies, you're trying to roll that back. How's that going to help you? More women are just going to be like, we're more educated than you already. So using our brain for most of us is not the issue. So women are just going to be like, you know what? I can't sleep with you. I can't deal with you. Too risky. Sorry. Goodbye. It's so simple. So simple.
I think a lot of men are going to feel like they're failing.
Well, think about how strange it is that men working less has made them worse fathers. Men being in the workforce less and potentially spending more time in the home has somehow made them into less of the father figure that they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And Roy was talking about the fact that there seems to be a bit of a question about why men were needed other than as sperm donors ancestrally. And after a long diatribe about what it's not this, it's not that, it's not the other, he said it's a hired gun problem. He said that men, it seemed, mostly were there to protect. They were there to enforce norms within the group. They were also there as security from either other tribes or from animals or from elements to go out and do things. It seems like even the big game hunting that men went to go and do netted an energy loss. So the lack of likelihood of them bringing it down, the amount of times that someone got injured or killed, and the amount of energy that you got back if you did finally take down the woolly mammoth or whatever, was almost always a negative. However, it was great mate signaling. So it was fantastic as a peacock's tail that look at how competent I am, I've brought this down. But women could have absolutely survived on berries and nuts and things they pulled out of the ground. And it seemed mostly were there to protect. They were there to enforce norms within the group. They were also there as security from either other tribes or from animals or from elements to go out and do things. It seems like even the big game hunting that men went to go and do netted an energy loss. So the lack of likelihood of them bringing it down, the amount of times that someone got injured or killed, and the amount of energy that you got back if you did finally take down the woolly mammoth or whatever, was almost always a negative. However, it was great mate signaling. So it was fantastic as a peacock's tail that look at how competent I am, I've brought this down. But women could have absolutely survived on berries and nuts and things they pulled out of the ground. So my question as he went through all of this was, well, okay, well, what is the role of men? If that's the case, if we didn't need them to go and hunt, and women, they do allo-parenting, you've got the grandmother hypothesis now for why menopause occurs. So it seems like women stick about and they do this sort of shared parenting thing. Unbelievably rare. Even in other primates, allo-parenting, very, very rare. Like the mother takes care of her child. Not in humans. It's the mother and the grandmother and some of the aunties and sisters and maybe a friend. And it's this big, big group. Okay, so what's the use of men? I wonder whether we are seeing again, in the same way that women or females having equal access to education unearthed some of the underlying disparities within the system. I'm wondering whether the same thing has occurred within the family, that with women no longer needing men around, that the surplusness of men within the family has now finally been revealed.
So
oh my goodness, this guy, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, these questions are fire. So we're watching this for the first time together as usual, y'all. Fire questions, because I just read this in a book where it turns out that women have always worked. There's not ever been a day on Mother Nature's green earth that women have not worked, y'all. Even all those years where he was talking about like hunters versus gatherers, right? Who were the gatherers? Women were planting, growing food. So yeah, they could have. I literally had this talk just like a week or 2 weeks ago. We could literally survive without them even then. Women would even hunt. Women were even hunters. So there were women that would actually go out there and actually hunt food and bring back food. So they didn't use, that wasn't like a male explicit task. It never was. So the fact that he brought this out, I'm like, oh my God, that's such a good point. Because this is the second book that I've read that same information where it turns out that they've been lying to us, y'all. Males were never protectors. They were never providers of nothing. Okay? That's the patriarchy lying to you. Women have always been able to grow food. They've always been able to like farm. They've always been able to provide for themselves. And they've always done that historically. They've always been able to go out there and hunt for themselves, y'all. So this is a fantastic question because yes, that's 100% correct. We're kind of seeing the unearthing of the truth by the complete decimation of what the patriarchy classifies as the traditional family structure. Because I think what the patriarchy is really, it's an artificial way of giving males worth. So males have found a way to artificially create their worth. It's not innate because they're not necessarily born with any value. So they had to artificially create it. And that's what the patriarchy is. Wild. Okay.
Interesting. I mean, I love Roy's stuff. I cite him quite a bit. But I've been quite influenced by the work of Sarah Hrdy and Anna Machin. Anna Machin has a book that I think you'd be very interested in. It's called The Life of Dad. She's an Oxford evolutionary psychologist and talks about how fatherhood developed precisely for the reasons that you just hinted at, which is the increased calorific requirements of raising kids. Because our brains grew, we needed a lot more calories. So I watched the number, but suddenly it was 13 million calories or whatever to raise a kid. And actually that was impossible. Her view was that it was impossible for mums to provide that on their own. And so that's when fatherhood became a social institution, like 10,000 years ago. Because if the dad wanted his kids to survive, they needed more calories than mum could provide. And so he had to create some surplus calories for the kid. And that's the creation of fatherhood in her view, which sounds like it's a different view to the.
Well, I hope that's not the case because we've proven that wrong today. There's more fatherless children. There's more fatherless children in this world than ever. There's more fatherless children in this world than children who have fathers that actually even give a crap about doing any actual fathering. But guess who always sticks around? The mother. So women, I mean, we've been doing that too. So what is their purpose? I mean, all these questions he keeps not really answering. In my opinion, I'm not hearing any answers here. I'm not hearing any answers. You're saying that it's the calorie intake, but most of these males do not stick around to raise no children. And they never have. Even when we had women that were during the times where women were not able to work and were stuck in the homes, having to clean, cook because we were being oppressed and were not able to work, they were doing all the caretaking for the children. Women were the ones taking care of all the children. So that doesn't even make sense from the jump. It's like, okay, that can't be it, because if that's it, if that's the reason, then males are screwed. Okay, they are royally screwed.
On the Roy had, which is actually she could have done fine, and so it was just basically it's like a sport, right?
The big game hunting was the sport, and the other element was the bodyguard hypothesis.
Okay, so he could protect you. So it was a way you could show that you could protect. So it wasn't about calories. Okay, so it's more about the protector than the provider side of it.
Seems like that.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting and incredibly depressing if true.
I think about the fact that everything that we've spoken about so far.
See, he just said it himself. Incredibly depressing if true. Just be a bodyguard. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to marry you in order to for you to be my bodyguard. I make more money than you, so I could literally just like hire you, or I could just like buy a weapon. At this point where we are, girl, a weapon will protect you so much better than any dusty male ever could. And most of these males, come to find out, y'all, they don't even jump to protect women in the sign of danger anymore. You know what? Most of them will tell you, well, you're not my sister. Well, you're not my sister. You're not my wife. Most of them don't even protect their own sisters, y'all. I have brothers I would know. Y'all, well, you're not my wife or you're not my daughter. You know, they won't protect no women that they don't know, which makes them useless from a societal standpoint. If you're only protecting like one woman at a time who might never be in danger enough to even need said protection, so you're just walking around here useless, 99.9% of the time to the rest of society, it makes them even more useless. That's probably partially why he's saying, oh, I hope that's not true, because that would be not good news for males. And now with the abuse rates, let me see if I can pull this up, y'all. Because now with the rates at which women are being essayed by males, and it's mostly males that they're in relationships with and they know. So males have now become the predators, of the number one predators of women, to the point where the United Nations has had to get involved because they are unaliving women at a rate that's surreal, y'all. All right, so let's take a look here. So this says, this is like my favorite article. It's based off of gender-based violence. I'm pronouncing it in a weird way, so hopefully the YT algorithm doesn't pick up on it on my video. But listen to what this says. The United Nations has identified gender-based violence against women as a global health and development issue, and a host of policies, public education, and action programs have been enacted and aimed at reducing gender-based violence. So the United Nations it's so bad, gender-based violence against women is so bad that the United Nations has now had to get involved. So no way in hell can you tell me that these Neanderthals are no type of protectors. They're out of control. They're complete psychos. These aren't protectors. Women in Asia and the Middle East are killed in the name of honor. Girls in West Africa undergo genital mutilation in the name of custom. Migrant and refugee women in West Europe are attacked for not accepting the social mores of their host community. Young girls in South Africa are raped and infected with HIV and AIDS, because the perpetrators believe that sex with virgins will cure them of their diseases. At the richest, most developed countries of the world, women are battered to death by their partners. Let me zoom in. But yet these males want to tell us that they're protectors of what? Themselves? They're useless. I don't know what they're doing here. I gotta tell you, I do not know why they exist. I think what probably happened is that's why they were supposed to exist. That's why they were allowed to exist by Mother Nature. But it went wrong. Like, it went totally wrong. It did not work out, basically. It's like a failed experiment. You know what I mean? That's what I'm starting to think, because I mean, you can't make this is the data right here. You can't make this stuff up right here. So I think males are a failed experiment. I mean, because think about it. Also, the XY chromosome is dying. So nature has already started fixing this issue. They're like, the XY chromosome is literally going extinct, y'all. It's going extinct. There's less and less of them being birthed. It's just that's a long process. So that in and of itself probably will take a few millions of years to completely happen. But their chromosomes are getting weaker and weaker, while the XX chromosome continues to get stronger and stronger. So, and then on top of that, if you didn't know, we no longer need sperm to reproduce. We don't need sperm from males. They've actually developed a way where we can get sperm, because sperm is nothing but like liquid to that helps activate the egg, right? So now they're able to make that same liquid off of your bone marrow. So they can literally make that same liquid off of your bone marrow and inject it in you to activate your egg, and boom. So the fact that they've created this and not started marketing it is probably because, what are we going to do with all these males that are here? Because we don't need these many. The only ones we need here are alphas, quote unquote. That's how they define themselves. So I'm just using the same word as what they use to define themselves and categorize themselves. The only ones we need, I mean, we don't even need the alphas here, but the only ones that could even serve or begin to serve a purpose here are true alphas. And no, alphas is not just how much money you have, because there's like tons that are beta males, quote unquote beta males, that have a lot of money, but they're women abusers. They're children abusers. Those are betas. Those are betas. Those ain't no alphas. So many of them are going to end up dying off that, I mean, but there's nothing we can do. Like, women didn't cause it. We didn't do it, y'all. So all we can do is just watch them crash and burn, y'all. You know what I mean?
To be depressing if true.
I think about the fact that everything that we've spoken about so far, the change in education has unearthed some disparity that very much pulls the floor out from under where men thought their position was in society. And this family thing, it's the first time I've thought about it. I didn't even think about it while I was reading the book. And as I'm trying to join these dots now, I'm going to have to email Roy about it and see what he thinks. But dude, it feels like a vacuum. It feels like a hole being pulled out.
You should have Anna on as well, I think, because that'll be a useful exchange, definitely. I mean, it's hard for me to believe, just what little I know from Joe Henrich's work and Catherine Page Harden's work and Anna's work and so on too, that it can all be, it's all protector.
I'm pretty sure that there would be an element in there. It's how much of that is the case, and in a world which has been nerfed from the protector role, if the protector's been removed away from it a little bit more, what happens then?
Yeah, well, the protector role is kind of, it's certainly as a matter of practice become significantly less important. In fact, a lot of women's rights groups would say actually the man in the house is more dangerous than the man outside the house. So you don't want.
Exactly. I knew that's where he was going. That's why I pulled that data. Well, I didn't know that's where he was going, but that's where I went. Like, protector of what? Themselves? Wah, wah.
You're protecting, in terms of a protector role, you need a good police force and good domestic violence policies and laws. The provision thing is interesting. I mean, my view, but this is again going back to the sense that like men did provide, they generated a surplus for the family, for the kin, for whatever the group was, that they had to generate some kind of surplus calorifically or whatever, and very often risk their lives doing so. That's why Roy's very fond of this stat that we have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors, because the men only have a 50% chance of reproducing, which is why they're more risk-taking too. But if I bring it up to just what I know from the contemporary social science, actually the evidence is quite good that engaged dads are good for the dads. Importantly, and that's very often not said enough. And I don't think
they have to make themselves useful. That's what he means by engaged, but they refuse. They don't want to. It's not women that made all of these necessary traits that are necessary to take care of the home, traits that are necessary to be empathetic towards children, nurturing traits. It's not us. We are not the ones that made those things negative. I think even Aristotle, was it Aristotle or Plato? That was definitely gay and definitely a woman hater, y'all. Like that dude right there did not like women. What's the other guy, the psychologist's name? Freud. He was low-key a woman hater too. But the thing is, they project themselves on women. They hate themselves, so they project that on women. And it doesn't help them. They just end up living their whole lives because they never found the true cause of that hate, which is hate for self, hating themselves. And now we're at an impasse. They did it to themselves, right? Wah wah.
Say that enough in the book, honestly, but also good for the kids. You see these long run outcomes, and it can last a long time. So, the performance of boys at school and some of the acting out stuff we alluded to earlier.
Did y'all know that women that grow up without fathers in their life still turn out, like on average, still turn out better than males that grow up without fathers in their lives? Like, it doesn't really affect women as much whether or not the father is there. They still turn out better. They still turn out an evolved version of the parent, usually. When it comes to women, I'm telling you, this is what the studies say. Like, I'll make another video and I'll put the studies in the research in there. But so women without fathers still turn out to be an evolved version, usually, of the parent. But males that don't have fathers around, y'all, they already slow, but males that don't have fathers around on top of everything else turn out to be devolved. Literally. And it's like, so when we level out the playing field between males, the male species, and women, this is what we find. It is horrific for males. Good luck to them. Crazy.
Much better with engaged fathers. That's just true. And so what kind of provisioning is going on there is a different thing. I think the idea that dads are providing and protecting and teaching is still all true. It's just the nature of that provision and is very different in the world today. So the way we express what I would argue are, let's say they're only 10,000 years old, that's still a long time, 10,000-year-old fathering roles and instincts is still applicable, especially to adolescents. I think that's really...
Sir, it is not applicable. Okay, because over the past 10,000 years, maybe he's trying this hard because he has sons. I mean, he's forcing it. Over the past 10,000 years, you've literally demonized anything that looks like a woman and anything that looks feminine. You've literally demonized it. So how do you expect to come back from that? You can't even come back from it unless you start over. And to start over, all the males that are here would have to go. So you can start over. Because you've literally, for the past 10,000 plus years, like you say, demonized anything and everything feminine, or that you considered feminine. So now you have nowhere to go. Even the males that might want to partake in that, all of a sudden you start seeing that they're sleeping with other males because they don't know how to be. Right? They like, oh, well, if I'm feminine, then maybe I'm just gay. Right? So all of a sudden they're gay. You know? So, and I'm just saying this happens in some instances, not all the time, of course, but I'm just using it as an example. It happens in some instances, even.